You're listening to Big World Network.
Just Kill Me, Season 2, Episode 1, Confusion. Written and read by Wendy Herman. Why hadn't I told her? The woman I lived and breathed for had just told me she loved me, and all I could do was cringe. Not with disgust, but with the pain that now, just when I might get the chance to make her happy, I was losing her. I could still feel the heat of her body beneath me. The past 10 minutes seemed like a dream. First a dream, then a nightmare. I watched helpless as the car sped away, getting lost in its own cloud of dust. I had failed. As I sat on the ground, covered in the same dust, my mind was still swimming, as if I'd been drugged. I didn't understand what had happened. Freya and I had been screwing around when, admittedly, we should have been paying attention to our surroundings. But Leon was late, and since that was a common occurrence, I wasn't concerned. He had been my most reliable inside source for 4 years. I guess my number 2 source had just been promoted. I shook my head and tried to stand. Nope, not yet. I pushed the wave of nausea away. I needed to focus. One minute we were horsing around like 2 colleagues, and then I had inadvertently made her fall. I was still pissed at myself for that mishap. I was so worried I had hurt her, but she always proved to be tougher than I gave her credit for. When I realized she was okay, I meant to get up, get off of her so she could stand and assess the damage. I knew she would be homicidal if her new jacket had received so much as a smudge. Damn, she looked good in that jacket. Then, all of a sudden, I could still see the memory I had been transported to, that day in the park under the oak. I had dreamt about that day nearly every night since, well, I couldn't pinpoint when the dreams started, but they tortured me on a regular basis. But this time it wasn't a dream. It had seemed so real, felt so real. I was 23 again and about to make love to the woman of my dreams in a surreally beautiful setting when the car... Wait. We had made love that day. The car had been in the present, not the past. The car had snapped us, out of our... Jesus. I knew something strange was going on here. It hadn't been just a little trip down memory lane. Freya and I had both experienced it, of that I was certain, based on the way she had so easily started caressing and undressing me. We were literally reliving our first time, and if we hadn't been interrupted, we would have... My pulse quickened. I have to get out of here. I quickly buttoned my shirt and my pants, took a deep breath and held it. Slowly I stood, eyes closed. When I was fairly sure I wouldn't hurl, I started back toward the car on the other side of the bridge, concealed by a gentle slope in the terrain. As my mind cleared and stomach settled, I broke into a run. I skidded into the driver's side door and got in as quickly as I could. I began to sort it all out in my head while I drove like a bat out of hell. There was no sense in trying to chase after them, as there were a dozen different routes out of here and back to the city, and they had a good 10 minutes head start. The goons who took Freya were just kids, and if they wanted her dead, they would have taken care of her right then and there, and then killed me. I was sure they were acting under orders, working for someone who wanted an agent alive for what? Collateral? A trade? Whatever the reason, I was sure I had had at least 24 hours to find her before... Don't think about that. I knew every gang and unsanctioned organization in the state, and I'd gotten the midget's license plate number. I would find her. What made me nervous was the recent revelation that I didn't know everything about Freya's past. I didn't know why she was so special. Well, I knew why she was special to me, but why had the FBI been watching her for 2 decades? I had put the question together from the conversation that had been taking place when I entered Trevor's office for that fateful meeting 3 months ago, but I still had no answer. Ever since her mysterious, stellar performance at the shooting range and my orders to accelerate her training, I had stopped trying to get answers from Trevor. I attempted several times to get something, anything out of the FBI database, but it just led me to one dead end after another. She definitely had an old file, but there was nothing in it but her name and date of birth. Why keep her in the system? It definitely raised more questions than it answered. Desperate for information and keeping all the Hollywood versions of the lives of FBI agents out of the running, I spent every waking moment trying to decipher what Freya could have possibly done 20 years ago, presumably while we were dating, to deserve so much attention. I was sure the little man and his peeps had no idea who she was, and as I sped through the city streets, nearing the FBI building downtown, I discerned one thing. Freya was either more dangerous or in more danger than even her kidnappers realized. I prayed for the former, imagining that she was a Cylon who would be activated before the unsuspecting boys arrived at their destination. But I feared the latter, and that whoever was threatened by her existence these past 20 years was the kind of person, or persons, who could snuff us all out with the snap of his, or her, or their fingers. I parked and raced into the building, calling the last person I wanted to talk to at that moment, but the only one who would understand the urgency of the situation on every level. He answered on the first ring. "What?" he asked, annoyed. I couldn't get used to not being friends with this guy. "Trevor, Freya's been taken," I said, my voice shaky. "I'm walking in right now." A true professional agent, he immediately pushed his personal feelings aside. I was just imagining this, of course, and replied, "Come straight to my office." When I walked in, Trevor was standing behind his desk, loading his pistol. I got the feeling I suddenly had a new partner. "What happened?" he asked, not looking up. I walked over to his desk, but remained standing. I couldn't sit. Sitting meant I wasn't actively looking for Freya, and I wouldn't sit until she was found. Not until she was safe in my arms. Shit. What was I thinking? She was still a married woman. But she loved me. I would hold on to that and figure out the rest later. I leaned on Trevor's desk with both hands and filled him in. I told him everything, except her last words to me. That part was only for me, and wouldn't help find her anyway. I don't know why I told him everything else. Maybe I wanted to see his face when I told him his wife had very much wanted to get my clothes off. Maybe I knew I would have to tell him eventually. How else could I explain why I let these creeps take her without a fight? Trevor was now frozen in place, staring at me with blank eyes. I could tell he was processing it all, just as I still was, but I couldn't tell whether or not he was contemplating using one of the fresh bullets in his firearm on me. I waited for him to respond, but not long before I pressed. "Say something." He breathed and looked down at his gun again. He shook his head and laughed. "What do you want me to say? Congratulations?" He finished loading the gun and thrust it into the holster, already secured to his waist. He looked up at me. "She's still my wife." I closed my eyes and tried to focus. "Trevor, you don't understand. Something happened to us. We didn't intend to do what we did. It was like a vivid flashback, but even more real." I found his eyes and pleaded with him. "It was like a drug-induced memory recall." I realized I wasn't explaining myself very well. I tried to start again. "Trevor, whatever happened between you and me, I would never—" Nope, this wasn't going well. I gave it one more shot. "You know how the government picks random people, school teachers, accountants, pilots, college students, to test the latest mind control technology?" "What the hell are you talking about?" he accused. "Are you saying some covert branch of the government made you seduce my wife?" Yeah, that did sound ridiculous. "I'm saying I never would have consciously made a move on her," I said honestly. "You know how I feel about her, but believe it or not, our friendship still means something to me. I may be a prick for being in love with another man's wife, but I would never, will never be the kind of guy who lures her away from her family." My clarity was finally back. I knew what I needed to say now. "Trevor, I'm saying that there is something else going on here, or has been going on for 20 years. Freya and I had a very real flashback, like amnesia patients when they recover a strong memory." That got his attention, but he still wasn't offering any information. "If we're going to find her, you need to tell me what you know," I demanded. "Has Freya ever had amnesia?" He retrieved the jacket from the back of his chair and quickly put it on, then rounded his desk, pausing next to me. "We'll talk in the car." That wasn't good enough. I grabbed his arm as he made for the door. "Just give me something. I'm losing my mind here." For a second, the old Trevor, my lifelong best friend and confidant, was back. He seemed genuinely concerned about my well-being. He sighed and lowered his gaze. I knew anything he told me could get him fired, or worse, but I didn't care. I released his arm. Has Freya ever had amnesia? I asked again. He leaned in as if someone else might be listening, although we both knew this section of secure offices was the only part of the building that wasn't bugged, and said just above a whisper, "You both have."
You're listening to Big World Network.